Good afternoon, everybody. We'll start today's session with an opening blessing. Loving Heavenly Father, we offer ourselves to Thee and come to You this time, asking for Your blessing and help as we're gathered together. We pray for guidance as we discuss this important topic and ask that You would clearly show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work, help us to work together, and encourage each other to excellence. We ask that we would challenge each other to reach higher and further, to be the best that we can be for the betterment of our communities. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Mancini. Greetings. In the name of the National Latino Behavioral Health Association and the National Hispanic and Latino Prevention Technology Transfer Center, we welcome you. Our center is happy to partnership with the National American Indian and Alaskan Native Prevention Technology Transfer Center to bring you a 4-part virtual learning session titled Culture is Prevention. This is session 1, and the title is Different Cultures, One Vision. My name is Dolca Michelle Zelaya. I am the program coordinator for the National Hispanic and Latino Prevention Technology Transfer Center. I will be your co-host today, along with our colleague Cindy Sago from the National American Indian and Alaskan Native Prevention Technology Transfer Center. Before we introduce our moderators and panelists, here are some brief instructions about today's virtual learning session. The virtual learning session will be recorded and archived for future playback. A copy of today's presentation will be also available after the event. The lines will be muted throughout the presentation so as to minimize background noise. When we get to the Q&A portion of our session, you will have the opportunity to ask questions by clicking in the Q&A box, and the moderator will present your question to our panelists. Let's start with introducing the National Behavioral Health Association. NALBA is a nonprofit organization located in New Mexico, and the mission and goal of the National Latino Behavioral Health Association is to influence the national behavioral health policy and eliminate disparities in funding and access to services, and improve the quality of services and treatment outcomes for Latino populations. NALBA's executive director is Mr. Fred Sandoval. Next slide, please. Now, allow me to introduce you the Prevention Technology Transfer Centers. Our PTTCs are part of the TTC network, which is a multidisciplinary resort for professionals in the prevention field. Both were established in 1993 by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. The PTTC network is comprised with 10 domestic regional centers, 2 national focus area centers, and a network coordinating office. Together, the network serves the 50 USA states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the US, Virgin Islands, and the Pacific Islands of Guam, America, Samoa, Palau, the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, and the Mariana Islands. Here you are seeing a map of the US-based ATTC, HTTC, and PTTC. Our center has a national focus for Hispanic and Latino communities and the workforce that provides services to these communities. Next slide, please. Our PTC is staffed by Dr. Pierluigi Mancini, our project director, Priscilla Yamasi, the executive administrative assistant, and myself, Dolca Michelle Zelaya. Now it is time to introduce Cindy Sago and her team. Cindy, welcome. Thank you so much for collaborating with us, and it's an honor for us to work together in this project.
Thank you so much, Dolca. And thank you everyone, and welcome again to this session. The National American Indian Alaska Native Prevention Technology Transfer Center is part of the Native Center for Behavioral Health, which also includes our Addiction TTC and Mental Health TTC. Our center aims to provide training and technical assistance to substance abuse prevention field specialists, that is professionals, paraprofessionals, organizations, and others in the prevention community who are focused on American Indian and Alaska Native communities. Our center, the National American Indian Alaska Native Prevention Technology Transfer Center, activities and services are focused on developing and disseminating culturally appropriate tools and strategies needed to improve the capacity of prevention specialists so as to deliver effective, culturally informed, evidence-based, and knowledge-based practices with the intent of enhancing the quality of substance abuse prevention interventions, trainings, and other prevention activities in the American Indian Alaska Native communities. Next. Our center is manned by us and a lot of other members of the group whose pictures are not on the screen. We have Dr. Anne-Helene Skinstad, who is the program director. We also have Sean Bear, who is a member of the Muskoki tribe and is the co-director of our center. He's also here on this call. And you also have me, Cindy Nanaba Sego, who is the program coordinator of the center. Next, please.
Thank you, Cindy. Also, we were asking you to fill out a brief survey at the end of this event. This satisfaction evaluation is important to the work we do and provide us with the opportunity to improve our training efforts. Although we are not securing continuing education credit for this event, we plan to do for future events. So a certificate of completion will be sent to you after this event. So let's begin. We have a full house. We have wonderful moderators and a wonderful panelists. And this afternoon is my honor to introduce Dr. Pierluigi Mancini, which is the project director for the National and Latino Addiction Technology Transfer Center and the National Hispanic and Latino Prevention Technology Transfer Center. Both centers are housed at the National Latino Behavioral Health Association, NALBA. Dr. Mancini has over 30 years of experience in culturally and linguistically appropriate behavioral health treatment and prevention. And Dr. Mancini is one of the most sought after national and international consultant and speaker on the subject of mental health and addiction. His areas of expertise is immigrant behavioral health. Dr. Mancini, welcome. It's an honor to have you this afternoon.
Thank you, Dolka. So I'd like to introduce Lina Gachupin. Lina is a member of the Zia and Hemes Pueblo and of the Sun Clan from New Mexico. She holds a master's degree in clinical and administrative social work from the University of Utah. Lina has also completed postgraduate training, social work training at the University of New Mexico in child and adolescent psychiatry. Currently, she is the president of the Albuquerque Area Intertribal Council on Behavioral Health. That center is a consortium of Pueblo, Navajo, and Apache tribes in the 4 Southwest states region. The directors come together to share local, state, and national behavioral health information that is pertinent to those respective tribes. Most recently, Lina retired with 31 years of federal service from IHS and BIA, and she is employed as a clinical social worker in Pueblo of Hemes. Thank you. Next, Dr. Mancini.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Dolta. And hello, everyone. I am so pleased to be here with you today on behalf of the National Latino Health Association and both the national focus centers that are bringing this program together. It's my pleasure to introduce the panelists that we have here today. Let me begin with Maria Jose Carrasco, who serves as the Chief of Staff of the Latin American Montessori Bilingual Public Charter School, a top-tier elementary school in the District of Columbia and one of a handful bilingual Montessori schools in the nation. Prior to joining LAMB, Maria Jose spent 18 years at the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the nation's largest mental health organization in the country. She was recognized for her advocacy and public education and engagement efforts with various awards, including the 2009 Award for Excellence in Hispanic Advocacy and Leadership from the National Resource Center for Hispanic Mental Health, the National Award for Leadership in Advocacy for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Mental Health by the National Mental Health Consumers Self-Help Clearinghouse. Maria Jose received her master's in public administration from George Mason University and her BA in political science from Truman State University in Missouri. Our second panelist is David Natsuway from Pueblo of Laguna tribal member. A native of Arizona, David Natsuway holds a BA in psychology with a concentration in basics in addiction counseling from the University of New Mexico and an AA in communications from Central New Mexico College. David has worked as a substance abuse counselor and an addiction support group facilitator with the Pueblo of Laguna Behavioral Health and Social Services. David works as a tribal healing to wellness court consultant for Tribal Law and Policy Institute and for the National American Indian Alaska Native TTC. David served in the United States Navy as a musician's mate, retiring in 2011 after more than 20 years of honorable service. Thank you, David. And remains active as a musician. With his music experience and great appreciation for the therapeutic power of music, he has been a Music is Healing presenter for the Pueblo of Laguna Prevention Program. Welcome, Maria Jose and David. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here with us today. We have a lot of people waiting, a lot of people interested in this topic, so I want to go ahead and get started. And the way we're going to get started is I'm going to give each one of you an opportunity to have an opening statement. But during this opening statement, I want you to insert an answer to the question, what is culture to me and my people? And Maria Jose, would you go first, please?
Sure. Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a true honor and pleasure to be with you today to share a little bit about what I know, what I have experienced about my culture, my community. So as Pierluigi mentioned, I worked in the mental health field for almost 2 decades. What took me to this field was what happens to many of the folks that join NAMI, if you're familiar with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is I have family members that have severe mental health conditions and also alcohol or substance abuse issues. So when I started my career early on, I did it because it was a very personal issue, right? I wanted help. I needed to understand some things so that I could help my loved ones and I could just process things better for myself. I looked a lot for places and people that could help me find some of the answers I needed and some of the things I didn't. I didn't find anything, right? There was very little out there that I could find. I came to the country to go to school, graduated high school, and then came to the US for university. I went to school in Missouri, like Pierluigi mentioned. I'm originally from Ecuador. Imagine what it was like to come from South America, Ecuador, to suddenly be in the Midwest, in a small town where there are very few people that look like me, understood who I was, what I was, and all my background. So those were very formative years to me because I realized that like 2 flights have made me be a completely different person, allegedly, from everyone that saw me. Like everyone that saw me will see me, hear my accent, immediately ask me about how to make burritos, how to make enchiladas, or ask me about Mexico this, Mexico that, Mexico this and that, right? So one of the first things I learned about culture is that, you know, like to the outside world, many times it didn't matter what my culture really was. it only mattered what they thought my culture was. They saw me, a brown person, they heard me, a person with an accent, and that immediately made them have assumptions about who I was, what I came for, and what I needed in this country. So that had a big impact in everything I did when I work in mental health, and even now in the work that I do in education, right? For many of us, even in big cities and very diverse cities like Washington, D.C., how we look, how we talk, like it's going to determine how people perceive, treat us, and what we get out of everything. I don't have to go in detail with you because I'm sure you're familiar. There's the disparities in mental health and behavioral health treatment for Latino communities are well documented, even when we account for socioeconomic status. And to me, it's been the driving force in my career. Same in mental health, like in education. It's not fair that someone, just because they look like me, talk like me, or have my background, will have less access and poorer care than someone else. And that is something I live daily at home. You know, my husband is white, so same home, same education level, same everything. But I know for a fact that his treatment is going to be better than mine. And I know for a fact that sometimes if I want things to get better, I send him before I go myself to get something done, right? So some of the opportunity and the privilege to really make this our life call and to work on this field, to change those disparities, to call attention to them and improve things for our communities. Many of the members of my community don't have that luxury, right? They came here escaping violence, escaping trauma, poverty. They have different circumstances that prevents them from accessing some of the things that they need and deserve to have. So when I think about culture in the term of what is it for my people, and I'm thinking today is called only in terms of my people as the Latino group in the United States, you know, I think our culture is rich, it's vibrant, it's dynamic, but at the same time, it's very misunderstood. Many of us still have to fight daily to be clear about who we are. Like, you know, not because my name is Maria, that means the assumptions that some may have, you know, I'm a maid somewhere. Not because my name is Maria, that means that I came fleeing violence from Central America. Like, yes, that's the reality for many, but it's not all of us. So part of what to me culture is embracing, recognizing that we are as diverse as we come, and that each of these components deserves to be preserved, upheld, and celebrated because they make a difference, definitely in each other's days of life, but also in treatment. You know, in behavioral health, you could look at all the information that exists about Latino behavioral health, Latino mental health. A lot of the research, and rightly so, focuses on the biggest Latino cultures in this country: Mexican Americans, Central Americans, Puerto Ricans. We have more information about these communities, which is wonderful. It's great that we have that. But if you're like me, someone from a small country in South America, then that's not as helpful because some things will apply to me, but not all of them. To close, when I think about what my culture is, it's as diverse as it comes. Sometimes it's misunderstood and misinterpreted. A lot of things that like you think when we talk about Latinos are true. We are family oriented. We are a tight-knit community. A lot of our culture is a protective factor when we deal with behavioral health issues. So it's something that I celebrate and embrace. And a part of it, some parts that are still not completely even, they're always, and that's something that I'll recommend everybody keeps in mind.
Thank you so much, Ma Jose. David?
Good morning and good afternoon to those who are on whatever time zone you're in. I am Dave Natsuway. I'm a Pueblo of Laguna member, and I was kind of raised as an urban Indian. So not being raised on the reservation, there is a distinct difference. Things that I was exposed to, that those that live born and lived on the reservation don't. don't see. Even my kids, like after I got out of the Navy and I came back and my visiting with my family, you know, they always ask about my kids, and a lot of times they don't want to go out to the reservation. So my cousins refer to them as city girls, my daughters. So so yeah, there is a difference. So I think part of that was as far as urban Indians, there can be issues with identity, you know, not being engulfed in the culture like a lot of the people that actually live on the reservation, you know. So my exposure was limited growing up, you know, and not until I retired from the Navy and moved back to the area did I get so much exposure, you know, and then working at the Pueblo of Laguna as a counselor, you know, and meeting the people and the people really questioning who I was, you know, where I guess where I fit in, that's my perspective, is like, where do I fit into this, you know, and not being raised there, not being a part of it, even though all my family is there. A lot of the people just they recognize the name, but they don't know who I am, you know. So as far as introductions go, you know, they're always very long introductions. You always have to introduce yourself through your grandparents, your great grandparents, your grandparents, your parents, and then, you know, your uncles and aunts and everybody that's related. You know, as far as when I think of the cultural aspect, being urban, there are different things that go in that were involved in my life. Not only the native culture, but the military culture that I was in for so long, over 20 years, the military culture, and then meeting people that have never met a Native American before. You know, to me, I did not think, you know, I wouldn't even have imagined that. You know, I would have never thought that there were people that have never been in the company of another Native American. One of the other things too that I found interesting is traveling. You know, my job in the Navy was as a musician's mate, so we were always attached to whoever the admiral was, whatever the base. And when I did a lot of time overseas, and so I was always put in a position where there were a lot of dignitaries around. You know, we played for the admiral's parties, and I remember one time when we were in India, and we were playing for the American consulate, and there was I guess there was an interest in the way I looked, and so some of the local people came up to me and they asked me what I was, my nationality, and so the way I grew up, we referred to ourselves as Indians. You know, so I explain myself as I say I'm an Indian, and they automatically think I'm from India. So I go, okay, I'm Native American, and they said, yes, you're from America. And so I'm trying to explain this, and I said, I'm indigenous to America, and they said, oh, you're a red Indian. So, which I found very interesting. You know, the way other people identify with natives. And while I was overseas, I lived in Japan. My unit was stationed out of Yokosuka, Japan, and I used to play a lot in the community, and I used to play professionally up in Tokyo. And the leader of the band is half Japanese, half American. He was born in Hawaii, and you know, very fluent in both languages, and he's a very world-renowned musician in the States and in Japan. He's a very what they call a top call. So when you play in the clubs in Japan, you know, there's certain things that he likes to introduce, like blood type. You know, there's a great interest in these things, and so he was trying to explain my nationality to the audience, and the only way he could identify that the audience would understand, he had to make a reference to the Lone Ranger and Tonto. And I felt that was interesting to me, you know, to just the way other people perceive the nationality, you know, and trying to, I guess, without having to dive into stereotypes, you know. But, you know, which I ran into a lot in the Navy, you know, the TP reference, you know, a lot. You know, people asking me if I lived in a teepee, you know, no, you know, so you explain that. One of the other things I'm involved in, and I think of culturally, is on the sports side. You know, it doesn't say it in my bio, but I'm a professionally trained baseball umpire. So I went to umpires professional at school in Vero Beach, Florida, and did the whole 4-week course. So, and I know that on the reservation and throughout the Pueblos, there's always been a big interest in baseball, you know, from when baseball started. There's been books written about the Pueblo baseball teams. And so me as an umpire, I tried to get that interest growing out there on the reservation, you know, people that are interested in becoming sports officials. And through the New Mexico Activities Association, I'm also tied in with a program that's called Battlefields to Ball Fields, which gets veterans onto the ball field to officiate, because veterans have a unique skill. They have a unique leadership skill. They're able to handle situations and uphold integrity very well. So it's a focus. They make very good umpires, baseball umpires, you know. And as umpires, you know, we get yelled at a lot, you know, and then part of the military culture. Yeah, I got yelled at every day for 20 years, you know, so I was used to it. As far as what the culture means, so I think, you know, just moving back and getting involved, I mean, just throwing myself into it. It's the ceremonies, the ceremonial dances. There's a lot of the ceremonies that go on that are still private, that nobody is allowed to witness except tribal members. The dances, the different healing ceremonies that go on. The language is a big part of the culture. You know, growing up as an urban Indian, I was not, you know, I didn't experience the language as much. So what the tribe has done, the tribal council has allowed a website to be built that's only allowed for tribal members to go in, and it's a language website, you know, and so participation in that. And even a lot of people, I found out as a counselor out on the reservation, there's a lot of people that don't speak the language. You know, they weren't taught the language growing up, or their parents don't speak the language. So they found it, you know, that it's going to be a necessity to build this website, you know. And when for a long time it was totally forbidden, you know, the council would not allow social media in that respect. So the other thing is the songs, the ceremonial songs, you know. And when I went back and my cousins asked me, do I want to help sing in some of these ceremonies? I was very nervous about it. And I said, well, I don't know the language very well. And they said, one of the best ways to learn the language is to start singing the songs. So they took me in, you know, to the Kiva, and I got initiated, and I started joining them in the ceremonies. And it has taught me a lot more, give me a greater understanding of the ceremony itself, the importance of it, the serenity of it, you know, the feeling, you know, the healing part of it. So other things in the culture, like the artwork. My dad was he was an artist, all, you know, for most of his life. You know, he was a native jeweler. You know, I have a lot of relatives that are artists. The food, you know, as part of the culture, the food, you know, learning from my grandmother, learning from my mom about these, about the cooking, you know, and how to feel when you cook. You're just not throwing something together just to eat, you know. It's a ritual in itself, you know. And my mom always told me, never cook when you're mad, you know, never cook when you're sad, never, you know, be happy when you cook, you know, because it's nutrition, it's health, and you're using gifts that the Creator has given us, you know, to put together and to nourish yourself and to nourish your family, you know. And along with that, my father taught me to hunt when I was young, and that's a big part of the culture, going out to hunt. And you know, when they have the deer dances in the early part of the year, you know, I always wondered when they bring them in, when they bring the dancers in, they always bring them from the South, and I never really thought anything of it. And then my mom explained it to me, and that's the way in the olden times. The hunters always went south, and when they came back, they were coming back from the south. So they always bring the dancers from the south, on the south side of the plaza, and bring them up that way. And yeah, so all these things I've discovered as an adult that I didn't know as a kid, you know. So, and then the other thing is just the stories, you know, the lore, how things are, the emergence, where we came from, the emergence from what's known as Spina, the Mount Taylor, from that area, how our people came to be in that area, stories of the Kachinas, what they mean, the dancers, and the clans, you know, where the clans come from. My clan is Big Parrot and Little Bear. So we get our clans from our mother's side. We get our big clan from our mother's side. So Big Parrot, which is, you know, known as the keepers of the salt, you know, and the salt goes along with the food, you know, to add, to spice the food, you know. And I think one of the important things that I've noticed is the leadership within the community, the council elections. You know, there's a lot of importance in who is going to be in charge, you know, who's going to be running, you know, everything that's going to be going on, you know, because they want to keep things traditional, but you know, there's always the Washington D.C. side of everything, you know, and so they got to be versed in that. And I think there's always something about the traditional side of it that people get worried about, that it's gonna get too far away from the traditional side. And there has been arguments, and there still is, you know, going to a council meeting, you know, don't think you're going to be there for an hour or two. Right. You know, they could go on and on. You know, the very first meeting I went to, it was an installation of the new governor, and it started at 8 a.m. I didn't walk out of there till 8 that night. It was that, you know, because people have their input. So those are just a few of the things, you know, that are important to me, that I've noticed, you know, since I've come back, since I've come home, you know. And you know, even though I wasn't raised there, that's something that's always referred to. My cousins always talk to me, my mom, they always say, when you come home, when are you going to come home? You know, even though I wasn't born, I didn't live there, it's still my home. Right. You know, that's where I'm from. That's where my people are from. And, you know, that's something that I pass along to my kids, that, you know, don't be afraid to go home, you know, because you have family there and you'll be taken in there. And, you know, one of the things, like when I see Native people on the streets here in Albuquerque, you know, that's one thing that always passes through my head is, you know, I wonder why they just don't go home. Yeah. You know, but, you know, there's deeper issues, you know, that go along with the urban side of being Native, the substance issues and the violence that goes on out there. So thank you.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. Lena?
Thank you. Thank you, David. This is Lena Gotchabin, and I am from the Pueblo of Jemez and Zia, and I want to thank both ATTCs for allowing me to assist with the webinar today. I want to welcome everyone and to all my relations throughout. And I just want to quickly add, before I ask the next question, just quickly add to some of what David said. You know, we think in terms of, are we traditional? Are we bicultural? Are we assimilated? And if you think in those terms, we can be in either one or more than one. But again, also as far as culture goes, everything in our culture ties to our belief system and our connection to Mother Earth and our people, our community. Community to me is a sense of who I am, my identity, and where I belong. So I just want to share that before I ask the next question, which is, how has our culture been impacted by outside forces, example, conquistadors, and how do those dynamics still play a role today? There is a second question to this, and that is, how do our cultures continue to be strong and resilient, and how has that resilience helped us in the field of substance abuse prevention? Again, the first question is, how has our culture been impacted by outside forces, and how do those dynamics still play a role today? I guess as an go ahead.
Okay, this is Maria Jose, and please let me know if my audio has not improved. I'm sorry about that. I'll keep trying, but let me know how things are. I'll say, outside forces are always impacting our cultures. I think it's a fact of life. This is from the beginning of, even like if I think about just as an Ecuadorian, like the beginning of our country, the tribes that we had were then invaded by the Incas at some point, and then you keep going on until present day. So the thing is, like, we have a long history of, invasion. For some of us, in depending on where we are in Latin America, that's from the Inca Empire, that's from the Aztec Empire, from different bigger groups in the area. But then, of course, one of the events that's the most traumatic and the one that impacted the most to Latin American cultures was the Spaniards coming to Central America, North America, and South America. That created a profound shift in our history for forever, right? So they came, they killed thousands, if not millions, of our people. Then the rest of our people were put pretty much into slavery, even though that's not what it was called, but it's really what it was. The view at the time from the Spaniards that conquered the country was that Indians did not have a soul, right? So if you dehumanize someone to that level, then how are you going to treat that person and that community and those people, right? So then they went about trying to erase everything from our native communities and impose Catholicism, impose the Spaniard way of life, particularly so again in places like Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, places where we have high percent of indigenous communities. So that is something that created historic trauma that I know it's something that Native American communities share here. That's trauma that continues to this date for many of our indigenous communities in Latin America. So, and on top of that, of course, the Spaniards, then they mix with our Native American women, right? Many times we're talking about a lot of us, come descendants of mixed blood, Spaniard with indigenous people. Some of them, like many of those, are a result of rape and violence and abuse. So that has a huge impact on people like me. Like, I am not someone that's 100% white. I'm not someone that's 100% Indian. I don't even know what percent I have of each of those. I just know that I am a mixture. And for some of us, that's a very hard mixture to explore, right? Like for many centuries in some of our Latin American countries, it was people hid their Native American blood because they didn't want to be treated as second-class citizens because of many different things, even internalized racism at some point, right? But that means that like, generations like mine, like I know it's a fact that I have Indian blood, right? You just have to look at how I look and somehow my family members look, but I don't know how or where I could even start looking and exploring those roots that we obviously have. And that is the reality for many. When I was little going to school, like in most school, like, you know, people that look like me, we were considered mainly like white. Until I came to this country, I thought I was a white person. Then I quickly learned here that that's not the case according to this country, right? But that means that when I grew up, even my family, you know, we identified as white, so we were white. And if you told me I must have some native blood, American Indian, Ecuadorian Indian blood, I would have told you no way. But then now things have advanced, thankfully, in society to the point that that's obviously something we cannot hide. That's part of what we are, that's part of our history, but still very hard to explore that piece for many of us. So for us, like for some of us, that leaves a void, right? When I think about my Ecuadorian culture and I see the richness and the beauty, a lot of it is focused on the folklore, right? Our traditional dances, traditional music, traditional food. But if I look into that, that's all coming from the American Indian communities from Ecuador. It's not coming from people that look like me. So then which part of this is completely me, or am I just borrowing some pieces from different sectors? So that creates some, in a way, it's like an identity crisis, right? Like I'm not fully Indian, I'm not fully white, then I'm a mixture of all types of things, right? And that's something that we have for like, you know, like long time have to deal and process because of the legacy left to us by the conquista, right? But in a way that also applies today, like I can say that some of the same dynamics happen. Most of the Latinos that come here are people that come escaping crime, poverty, and violence. So they come here like from a traumatic experience, trying to reestablish their lives, right? So it is again an outside force that changed their history and their group, and then on top of that, they need to start the process of acculturation, right? How do they fit in this country? Which is also affected by how did they come here? Is it someone that came with like a status or with papers or not? That is going to be a huge impact on how that person is able to join and navigate our society. For many Latino families in this country, we are blended families in the sense that many of us have family members that are documented, family members not documented, right? So many families, when I work at NAMI, one of the biggest stressors they talked about was, I cannot go look for treatment because I'm afraid that I was going to put my loved ones in danger because they don't have those papers, right? So,
oh, I have this right, or this is something I can ask for. Many folks do not look for it because they are afraid of putting themselves or some of their loved ones in danger. So all of these, you know, like the historical trauma, plus the stressors that come from moving to a new country, plus navigating two different communities. Imagine if you don't speak English, how even more complicated that gets. So all of these things like really create a lot of risk factors for Latinos. At the same time, something that I think it's important to point out is what the research tells us, which I always think it's fascinating, right? Like when I did a lot of trainings for providers about Latino mental health, I will ask the audience, so who do you think is in worse mental health and at higher risk for behavioral health issues? A recent immigrant or a third, fourth, fifth generation Latino? Every single time, people would tell me, Of course, there is an immigrant, right? Because again, she or he may have papers or not, the acculturation stress, again, poverty, lack of English, whatever it may be. But the truth is the opposite. The research shows us that Latinos, like first and second generation Latinos, we have more protective factors and have better health and mental health, behavioral health outcomes than third, fourth, and fifth, and so on generation Latinos who are born in this country. So what the research is telling us is that people that come to this country from Latin America have some protective factors and have less of this, of any of mental health conditions, substance abuse conditions, than people that are born here that may have grandparents that are immigrants or great-grandparents and so forth. So what we know is that their lived experiences in this country, whether it's because of racism, discrimination, biases, poverty, lack of access to education, you name it, that is one of the most negative factors, and that's a better indicator of poor behavioral health outcomes for Latinos than migration status. And I'll stop here to give David an opportunity to chime in, and then we can go back and forth.
Okay, David. How has our culture been impacted by outside forces? And the second question I'll ask at some point regarding substance abuse. So go ahead, David. Sorry to interrupt.
So the same thing with the, with the influx of the conquistadors, the Spaniards, and the effect that they had on the pueblos here, and the beginnings of Christianity and Catholicism, to get the pueblos away from practicing their demon ways, that is something that has, as was said, the Spaniard impact is forever, and there are people in the pueblos, that they don't accept the Christianity part, the Catholicism, and I've met a few coming back. I just remember from childhood going to the church at the village there. It was completed in, I believe, in 1690. It's been there since then. And I remember going there as a kid and just growing up as an urban native. I was raised Catholic. And as we grew, and talking with some of the my older relatives, my older cousins mostly, talking and my grandparents, talking about we pray two different ways. We have our Indian way, our Kiva ways, and then we have our Catholic ways. And so there are people out there that they will recognize the Catholic way, but they won't practice it, because they would rather do the traditional. They would rather stay culturally traditional. So that's something that, it's there, it's long lasting, it's a belief system that exists. And, even our feast days, they're centered around the patron saint of the village. So in Laguna, St. Joseph, when they have the feast day dances, there's a shrine in the plaza where they bring the statues from the church and put them in the shrine, and in the shrine is all the village officers, the priest, and the statues, the church statues, and so that's something that has been, that's one of the things that that still exists because of because of the Christian influence. So one of the other things is that, you know, so for some of the people that, I guess some of the older people, that they had a harder time, and I know my grandfather felt this same thing too. Even though we lived in Arizona, there came a point where he would not come home anymore. He just would say, you know, too many things have changed. I don't want to come home. You know, I don't want to go home. So, so when things like that start to happen, there can be, what can happen is the teachings, the cultural teachings, they stop. They start to die off, and that not only can it happen to urban natives, but also to natives that live in that Pueblo community. You know, as you know, in my experience as a counselor, to meet clients that don't know anything about the culture was amazing to me. I was saying, how, you know, I was thinking, how can this possibly be? You know, you live right here, you know, right next to where everything goes on. How can you not know anything about the culture? And it's something that happened, that's something that was passed on. Their parents don't know because their parents didn't teach them. You know, there came a point where, you know, there was just that teaching had just stopped, you know, because of the influx of all these different influences, you know. So that's when you start to see the young kids starting to take on the other behaviors, you know, the substance use. You know, they get influenced by social media. There's a lot of domestic violence, you know. When I first started at Laguna as an intern, we had no meth cases. When I left Laguna a few years later, it was incredible how many meth cases there were, you know, and that's just I guess the urban influence, them bringing it from no interest in the ceremonial part and more interest in what's going on outside, and bringing it into the Native community. It was kind of disheartening to see, you know, just that how much of the following of the cultural ways have kind of gone by the wayside, you know. And one of the things when I started working out there was, I'm going to be able to learn a lot from my client. I'm going to do my best to guide them, but I'm going to also be able to learn a lot from them culturally. And then I slowly find out that a lot of them don't know anything or know very little about the culture, you know. And I can imagine that, yeah, that comes from past influences, the Christianity, you know, just the disinterest, just a lot of other things that go on out, you know, in those communities. So,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that come to mind too, as I even hear David and reflect on this is, you know, of course I'm sharing what is most familiar to me, which is an Andean, South American, like experience of Latino, right? But then I'm thinking about the Caribbean, you know, the Dominican Republic, or like our islands, right? Where like we have Latinos whose culture, like an historic, like their history is more like, you know, from like marked by slavery, by different aspects that perhaps were not the same as the ones that like were experienced like in Ecuador, right? And these are still part of Latino, right? Like, and even though we have history has influenced us in some parts the same way and some parts differently, there's some commonalities among us, right? Like among all Latinos. Yes, we're very diverse. There's a lot of differences, and we can discuss those at length if we put Latinos from different places under the same room. But then there's some things that hold true to us as an overall group. And those are the ones that I think of as our resilient factors, right? One of them, and the one that's more dear to my heart, is really that we are a community-oriented culture, right? Like when we think about like our world perspective and view and orientation is we, you know, how this impacts us as a group, as a community, as people, right? Rather than an individualistic perspective. Along with that community orientation is what has been researched a lot, which is this term called familialismo, which basically stands for, again, that we are, instead of oriented on me, what's best for me, what I want, my freedom, my needs, and that, we are more oriented towards our family. And we have very strong family bonds, right? And family for us goes beyond just family, you know, like blood relatives, right? Like families, it's a loose term. I have a lot of aunts and nephews that are not related to me by any way, mean or form, but just because, you know, there's a connection there, like love, spiritual and so forth, but no blood, right? So that would, and I'm thinking that most Latinos will agree with me that those are two of the most important factors that have helped us weather all of these different events throughout our history that have negatively impacted us. And that have made us continue to be here, thriving and changing and contributing, you know, all of these positives to society at large. Okay. Another one that comes to mind would be, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Jose, since we're running low, yes, can you hear me? I'm going to move on to some of the Q&As because we're running low on time and we have a lot of people who are interested in a couple of items. And I want to go ahead and couple some of the comments with this question to both of you. How can we come together in developing strategies and tools to get schools in our communities involved in learning about different cultures? And let me expand that question to, if you have some experience of sharing maybe some success stories that you've already witnessed or participated in, that communities have come together to develop strategies to help our communities.
I can start that.
Okay.
So one of the things that I saw while I was out at Laguna is putting a lot more effort into the prevention program and focusing more on the youth, you know, because one of the things, you know, I see the substance use, I see the domestic violence, I see all these other things going on. And when the kids see that, you know, it becomes a way of life, you know, and so the idea is, you know, you don't have to live that way. You know, that's not one of the virtues of our people, you know, and in thinking in terms of we also, as was mentioned before, thinking in terms of we and getting away from that individualistic ideology, you know, that is learned in the urban side. So what the prevention program has done is start creating a lot of traditional, you know, well, one, the language website was a big boost. The prevention program started pulling some of the people in from the community to teach traditional cooking classes, ceremonial clothing, ceremonial clothes making. They have a Women of Tradition program that covers a lot of that stuff. The youth prevention programs that involve life skills and teaching hunting, you know, and survival skills, living off the land, and just getting people involved in the more community aspect, you know. Sports is a big thing, so there's youth and adult sports programs and that are going on, you know. And like I mentioned before, you know, baseball has always been a big thing with the Pueblos, you know. So once I had my umpire skills together, you know, I was very happy to go out there and you know, participate in that, you know. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of a joke when you talk about, I guess in any sport, you talk about res ball. Yeah, as umpires, yeah, you take it pretty good from those guys. But but you're out there to teach. You're out there to set an example for the youth. So a lot of focus has been put on youth, and in schools too. They have at the end of each year they have programs. I think they take a two or 3 weeks at the end of each year to have programs go on, like drum making, other sports programs, things that they can do to learn more traditional things. And what they do is they pull, they can pull in people from the community that are practicing those things very, a lot, and then they bring them in and help out and teach these things.
Great. Jose?
So one of the things, I don't know if you noticed, I don't know if you guys caught that I did a 180 in my career, 10 years in HUD, and what am I doing now in education? And it touches exactly what Pierluigi asked, right? 2 young kids, and to me it's extremely, one of my priorities is that my kids grow up as proud Latina women, and not only them, but everybody around them recognizes, embraces, and salutes that part of who they are. And so that's what we're living now. Like the school that I work with, it's called Latin American Montessori Bilingual. We are a pre-K3 to 5th grade school. And we are unique in this country because we're a Montessori school, but we're also talking about my kids. Let me close the door. So we are a school that was founded by Latinos to teach not only Spanish language, but to teach about Latino culture. So our population, we have around 600 students. Half of them are like Latino, we have white, African American, and different groups. But what I love is that this is entire environment where we are making everybody aware of, like, wow, look how rich is this culture, and look how much they are giving us. Of course, most people that come to our school come because of the Spanish language. But our job in the school is to teach them, like, that is just a small part of what Latinos offer to this country and to this, right? So it's like really explore with our students, with their families, what is culture, what's to be a Latino, and how can non-Latinos see, embrace, appreciate that, and at the same time how we Latinos within this community also learn, appreciate like the other cultures that are represented in our community. So I guess part of my answer is that we need a lot of intentionality. A lot of families, say, you probably have heard this before, I teach my kids not to see color, they get along with everybody. When the opposite is what we need to do. We teach our kids, you need to see color because that's part of life, and unless you are blind, you should see color, right? And that's just one of the ways in which our differences manifest. So I think school interventions have to be very intentional about bringing up the differences, and that's scary. Most people don't want to do that. It creates discomfort. People think it's going to create trouble and all of that. But if you really don't bring those up front, you're not going to really do the hard work that you need to do. That then it's like to learn from those, like value them, embrace them, bring them together with your own, and so forth. So to me, the interventions have to be something that really outline whatever culture we want to focus on, like, this is what this culture is, this community is, and then have serious and hard conversations about that, and then see how you embed that culture or the perspectives from that culture that you want in every aspect of your intervention, whatever you may be doing. And I saw a quick question, I believe it was about like the name of the school. We're called Latin American Montessori Bilingual. So it's lam.pcs.org. I invite you to visit the website. And we are looking for similar schools across the country so that we can create those connections and really start like a national network of like-minded schools.
Thank you, Ma Jose. There is a question that I think should be a brief answer, but I'll extend it to both of you. So one is, do you refer yourself as Indian, or do you prefer Native American or Indigenous American? And then I'll extend that to Ma Jose for Hispanic, Latino, or Latinx. And we'll start with you, David.
Sometimes it depends on the audience, you know. I did see a comment. Yeah, back in the 70s, I was an Indian, you know. When in the 80s, I was a Native American, you know. So it changed, but I think more so, it's I refer to myself as a Pueblo, as a Laguna, you know. And then, you know, if somebody asks, what is that, you know, then I can explain it to them, you know. It's not always best to put all tribes in one basket like that, you know, because people they identify with their tribal culture or their tribal custom, you know. So so I don't know, in general, you know, I will usually say Native, just, you know, in general population, you know. But I prefer, and for the most part, I will say my tribe, you know. And if they have any questions, then I can say, yeah, that's Native. Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that some people have mentioned to me that even the name of the Technology Transfer Center is American Indian / Native Alaskan.
Yeah.
Or Alaska Native.
Yeah. So one of the things, okay, if I look at my music training, and when we prepare for concert or prepare for a show somewhere, and we're selecting music for the show, one of the questions is it audience friendly? You know, is this song audience friendly? So, you know, I think of that in terms of that label, you know, something that everybody's going to understand, something that, you know, so yeah, American Indian that works fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Emma Jose?
I would agree with David that it depends the setting, who I'm talking to, and all of that. There's a lot of debate about this, and I also know that it's sometimes regional, right? Personally, I usually use Latino or Latinx. I do not like Hispanic. That's something you never hear coming out of my mouth. But I know that there's parts of the country where Hispanic may be preferred over Latino or Latinx. I also think Latinx sometimes, from my experience, is kind of like because it's a newer term, I find younger people using it more than previous generations, let's put it that way. But by far, I would prefer the term Latino and Latinx.
Okay. Lena?
Okay, thank you, David and Jose. There's so much that both of you have shared with all of us, and many out there who have many to share with us. So what I would like to ask is for a closing statement from each one of you with all of the above, all that you've shared. Please share with us your closing statement. I'll go with David first.
Well, you know, as far as the culture goes, and, you know, I think the focus, I mean, we really need to pay attention to the way the youth, the way the kids are perceiving things in the world today. You know, there's a lot of turmoil, and there's a lot of racism being thrown around, you know, racist statements, racist ideology, you know. And I know that, you know, as a Laguna Pueblo, you know, it's not one of the virtues, you know. We don't think in terms of boundaries, you know, we think in terms of unity of people, You know, we're all people, you know. So, you know, as far as not seeing color, you know, and you see, you know, teach kids to just to see people as people, you know, treat each other with respect, you know, and, you know, that's something that's always been passed on to me, you know, that to respect each other, you know, to treat each other right, you know, to be good to each other, you know, and it helps us in that balance, to stay balanced, you know, to pay attention to our balance, spiritual balance, to stay healthy, you know, to stay involved, you know. So, thank you.
Thank you, David. Jose?
Thank you, David.
So I have found this conversation fascinating. So David, for everything you have shared, and everybody for the comments that you are very active on the chat. I love it. I haven't been able to read everything, but this has been a very rich conversation. My parting thoughts are like, you know, no surprise for anyone that it's a minority in this country. It can be hard to be a person of color in this country, right? Particularly now, given what's happening in this country. And sometimes we have to go through life learning, when do we put our foot down? When do we just take that microaggression and move on? When do we fight? I mean, there's just so much of that we carry on a daily basis. And that weighs heavily on us, right? There's days we can carry that better than others. But what gives me hope is that because of what's happening around the Black and African American community, I think this country is a place where people, particularly the white community, is truly trying to understand, okay, what does this mean, this diversity piece, this white privilege piece, and all of that. So my closing message today for everybody is like, you know, engage in that conversation. I love this webinar because it gave me an opportunity to share with you my thought. My culture influences every aspect of my life, and hopefully it was useful to you as you provide services to other Latinos, right? But I can have that same impact at the school level we're working, friends that are asking me questions. It's a matter of really being able to, being willing to be vulnerable ourselves, also being brave ourselves, and willing to put we in front of me, right? Which is what our communities do the best at, right? We are community oriented, we're family oriented, and all of those things. So to me, when they ask me, okay, what do you really want people to remember about you being a Latina? And for me, the most important thing I say is that defines everything I do and who I am, right? Beyond of my language of preference, beyond that. So that they really want to engage me in whatever it is, treatment, education, marketing, whatever you're doing has to resonate with all of the pieces that make me, right? Not just pick and choose so that it's convenient and easy or whatever. So there's a lot to explore, a lot to unpack, but if you are not one of us Latino, you'll be amazed by how much we have to offer. And I think you'll be enriched by that, same way as we are enriched by learning from the different Native communities, what David has shared, and even what other communities have shared. So I thank you for being part of this. And I really invite you to be part of the other 3 or 4 sessions that are going to be part of this series.
Thank you, Mahase. This is Lena, and I just want to thank both ATTCs, PTTC for allowing me to participate as a moderator. There's been much shared today by both Mahase and David, and thank you very much. Many times I wanted to share my own thoughts with regard to culture and what culture means to me. I am Indian, full blood, and I appreciate who I am, where I come from, and I believe that's who I am as a person. Like I said earlier, everything in our culture ties to our belief system, to our connection to Mother Earth and who we are as a people, as a community, which gives us a sense of identity and belonging. But long before, as a child, my father was a medicine man who always taught me and my family, my siblings, as long as you have a good heart, mind, and soul, you will never go wrong. And I carry that with me every day in wherever I go and with the people that I help and work with, that stays with me. And so again, you know, each one of us has so much to share throughout Indian country, who we are as a people. We have similarities, we have differences, but no matter what, we are all related, and hope that we continue to survive through this difficult time, because that is one of the outside forces that is challenging our culture. Being a community, we are not coming together, whether it's powwow, whether it's Pueblo dances, traditional activity, because it's all about community. And it's been very, very difficult and challenging. And I just want to share my heart goes out to all, and keep our culture at our hearts no matter what, so that we can survive, and we will survive. And again, thank you. And I will give it to Dr. Messina.
Thank you so much, Lena. And thank you, David and Jose. I think it's been a magnificent session. I wish we had time. There were two very rich topics that came up in the question section that I know it would be unfair and unjust to begin to talk about, and with only 3 minutes left. And those were about immigration issues, and those were about assimilation issues, forced assimilation, and so on, which I think also play a role in who we are and how it affects our communities. The good news is that we have 3 more of these sessions that you'll hear about in a minute. I think that our cultures are rich, our cultures are strong, our cultures allow us to be able to do what we do and work together to empower the youth that is our future. I think that what we're giving today to the communities that are coming in after us, to the 1,000 people that joined us today, to the other 900 that registered and could not join us, that will be listening to us in a recording, is going to be able to empower them. I appreciate you opening yourselves up to us. I appreciate your honesty and your personal sharing. It's made me richer. I've learned a lot. I hope our audience has learned a lot. It's been an honor for me to be a moderator. Lena, it's been an honor to be a co-moderator with you. I appreciate your willingness to be a part of this. To Dolka and Cindy and everyone that planned this, thank you. And I turn it back over to Dolka, I believe, for the continuation of the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Dolka, you're muted.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mancini, and the moderator, Lena, and all the panelists. I think all this is a rich discussion. Thank you for all the participants. The chat and the QA was full of beautiful comments, and that we're going to take in consideration for the next sessions, as Dr. Mancini mentioned. Thank you for the invaluable work that you do for in our communities to preserve our culture. So over here in this next slide, you are seeing you're going to see the contact information for Bob Center. So feel free to reach us in case you want to request training or technical assistance. So we are here to support you and your programs. Next slide, please. And also, if we were not able to answer all the questions, please do not hesitate to reach us and to reach the presenters. Here is their contact information. Next slide. And remember, we are extending the invitation. Please join us for the next 3 sessions. So it's going to be July 14, July 22nd, and August the 5th. All of them are 1 p.m. to 30 Central Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So feel free to join us for the next 3 sessions that we are having. So next slide. And now we're going to have the closing blessing. By Sham.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, for directing this. Now, everyone will be redirected to a different page to complete the evaluation. Please remember, your opinion is so important for us. Once again, thank you for joining us during this event. Culture is prevention. Enjoy the rest of your day.